Hello and welcome to the Photography and Video Show podcast for March 2024. I'm your host, David McClelland, and this month we talk about Fujifilm's new X100VI fixed lens camera, OpenAI's text-to-video generator Sora, and how photography can be therapy. We also speak with photographer and creator Elise Swopes about Instagram and NFTs.
It's really just about how can I add something to this image that I captured of a skyline, whether it was in a helicopter ride or on the top of a building. Then when I'm looking at them on my phone, I'm like, okay, I don't want to just post this image of this cityscape. I mean, it's beautiful. There's a lot of people who post cityscapes, but I want to add something I feel like would make this elevated. And so that's why I started adding giraffes.
And coming up later on, we also have some really exciting new news about the in-person photography and video show taking place between Saturday the 16th and Tuesday the 19th of March 2024 at the NEC in Birmingham, including an exclusive discount code for your last-minute tickets. Before that, joining us to muse over this month's news is photographer, writer, colorist and therapeutic photography practitioner Gabrielle Matola.
Thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have a lot of skills under your wing there, photographer, writer, colorist, as well as therapeutic photography practitioner. And I want to land on that when we chat later on. But how do you describe yourself?
I guess as a photographer, most of the time. People like one-word answers. But I suppose lately I'm definitely transitioning into a therapeutic photography practitioner, more in the sense that I'm helping to enable other people to practice it by showing them what I do.
In terms of the photography that you do, just looking at the work on your website, on your Instagram, it seems as though photography, street photography are very much at the heart of a lot of your work.
Yeah, like a lot of people, I started out photographing landscapes and objects because people really intimidated me, even people I knew, even though I was really fascinated. I am really fascinated with people. I did psychology undergraduate as well as a motion picture degree and came to photography. So the street portraiture I do is a really great way for me to kind of stay in shape as a photographer. I like to think about it. I've also been on tour with musicians. I do a lot of landscape work. I've done 2 major solo motorcycle journeys, one to Iceland and back from England, and one up in Scotland all the way around the Hebrides and the Orkney Islands. And I just do a lot of meditative landscape work.
Right, let's have a look at this month's news. And, well, February 2024 was a big month for Fujifilm with the X100VI launch. Now, pre-orders for this were off the charts. I've seen numbers in the region of about 500,000, and such is the demand that scalpers, those people who will buy whatever it is they can and then sell them with a huge markup, well, they have been active selling units for as much as twice their retail price. So what is the camera? Well, it's a follow-up to the hugely successful X100V or V. The Roman numerals are all over the place here, Fujifilm. X100V is what people tend to call it, but then we're meant to be calling this the X100VI or VI. Anyway, what is it? It's a retro-styled premium compact camera that's become very much a street photography favourite. In terms of some specs, it's got a 40.2 megapixel sensor, which is up from the 26.1 in the V. It's got a fixed lens, 35mm f2, which is the same as the previous model, I think. But you can, I've seen, buy a teleconverter and a wide-angled adapter that you can screw into the front that look very useful indeed. This time around, also new as well, is the inbuilt image stabilizer, the IBIS, up to 6 stops of correction. I think that depends upon what viewfinder mode you have on there. Again, with the street photography angle here, great for that, great for low light stuff. But I think all the specs only really tell part of the story, and why this has been such a popular camera is that people love the look, this filmic 35mm look, the recipes, these Fujifilm simulations, and the ability to share these recipes online with others. Not unique to the X100 line, but something that's certainly drawn a crowd on TikTok, it seems. It's actually got the same sensor that's used on some other models, including the XT5 and the XH2. It's got a new processor as well, great autofocus. And of particular note here as well is the C2C or camera to cloud, which means the camera can, when it's connected to a Wi-Fi network, upload your clips, your photos, your stills to the cloud, or specifically to Frame.io, which Adobe bought 2 or 3 years ago. Now, honestly, I didn't even know that Frame.io could handle still images. I use Frame.io all the time for video projects, sharing them with clients and getting feedback. I didn't realize that it could do still images. There's lots more to talk about with the camera, but I'll press pause for there. I know lots of colleagues have had some hands-on time with this, and I can't say for certain, but I would be really, really surprised if there wasn't an opportunity to get hands-on with this camera on the Fujifilm stand at the Photography and Video Show in a couple of weeks' time. But Gabrielle, street photography, street portraiture, do you have a preferred camera or lens combo for this type of work?
Yeah, for the street portraits at the moment, I'm on the X-T5.
Okay.
I was on the X Pro 3. And I use their 35 1.2 lens, which is the 50 equivalent.
Okay.
I tend to use that for portraits. Yesterday, I was on the 23 1.2, which is a 35mm lens. And honestly, man, you're selling me this X100VI if I could get my hands on it. But it wouldn't be my camera of choice, but I mean, it's certainly with the same sensor and all of the features and how small it is. I think it would make any street photographer's kit complete pretty much in and of itself, especially with the converters. But I like to work closer to people, and I generally really like I usually go for face. If I'm doing more of an environmental portrait, I'll use a 35 equivalent.
Yeah.
I tend to like the slight compression you get with a 50.
Yeah.
You get a little bit more of the background thrown out of focus at the more open apertures. I usually shoot around f1.8, f2, even though it's a 1.2.
Yeah.
That's just to get the focus straight through, so I don't wind up getting the nose and not the eye, or vice versa.
The C2C, the camera to cloud thing, is something we're also seeing popping up on an increasing number of cameras, and that's something which, you tell me in a way, is that something that you would find working its way into your workflow?
So the thing I would say is, yeah, because I know it only has one card slot at the moment. Mm-hmm. Maybe they'll bring that out with the 7. It would be useful in backing up, and also it could open up other areas of potential with sharing. Like you said, you share with your video clients projects and get comments. Yeah, I'm also a Frame.io person for video because, as you said at the beginning of the show, colorist. So my background is in cinema. So I was an editor for years, and then I became a colorist. My specialty is making quote unquote recipes, as they call them, for photographs. I grade everything I shoot. And I know Fuji's great for one of the reasons I think it's so popular amongst amateur and hobbyist photographers. And when I say amateur, I mean people who do it for the love of it. I don't think that amateur should be a pejorative word ever. Professional just means you earn money from it, and that doesn't make you a better photographer necessarily. But all of the color science that came out of like Fuji's film world, all of those scientists, as far as I understand it, a lot of them were ported over and they worked on the color science on the cameras. So they do have really great rendition of color in their JPEGs that are produced. And for a lot of photographers, it's enough to just have a JPEG and it's finished. They don't need to have a raw file and grade it the way I do. And I have programmed my X-T5 to have different recipes to get inspired when I'm shooting. If I'm shooting RAW and JPEG in tandem, I tend to just shoot RAW these days, though. I've seen a lot of images that work really well, where the color has been applied in a thoughtful manner and it serves the image. And then I see an awful lot of stuff that's just kind of whacked on there for the effect, but it doesn't really necessarily serve the image. So there's behind every recipe, there's still somebody, God, for want of a better word, a chef, whose taste is dictating which recipe they use for which image and which style of photography they're doing. But yeah, all around, it's an exciting camera for sure.
Super stuff. So the other news story that's really been garnering attention this month is OpenAI. So yes, it's another AI story, but away from the still image creation is the video generation. And this is OpenAI's Sora, which is you type in a handful of words and it will create a short, up to how many seconds, 60 seconds maybe, video sequence, including those. Now, when this landed, when it was announced earlier this month, and it is still in very much a kind of closed access program at the moment, but the internet went pretty wild. I posted a link to a story on my LinkedIn, and wow, the comments got pretty spicy pretty soon in there, with a number of responses in terms of how they felt as though creativity was being stifled. Other people going, no, this is really exciting in terms of pre-visualization for sequences and so on. And then another group of people who were really concerned from a ethical standpoint, which also leads into a practical standpoint about the sources of the data, the training data for these large generative AI models, essentially scraping artists who've spent their time, spent their money making their living from creating these works, having them scraped for free is the allegation, and there are some court cases around this as well, it should be said, in order to create this generative AI output. So there's a lot of different lenses on this type of work. Gabrielle, I'm curious as to where you sit on the AI fence, or indeed either side of the AI fence.
I mean, the visual that comes to mind is I don't really sit on either side of the fence or even on the fence. I'm on a swing. I'm just,
Yes.
I'm kind of, I'm observing. I absolutely acknowledge the whole copyright issue, the massive infringement that's occurred with a lot of images and pretty much everything that's ever been created being referenced literally, like not just referenced in the way that I see something and I put it into a painting, but there is an argument for that's kind of done. But I'm interested in what it can do, because as a film student coming up, when I was, I was like, 17, 18, I was way too socially anxious to get on with making films with people. You have film as a collaborative medium. And I found it very difficult to come out of myself and communicate my ideas. And just logistically, like getting from A to B, it's incredibly hard to make film. Very expensive. To be able to sit down in a coffee shop and just sort of type in a bunch of text and create a moving visual. To me, it's exciting. I really wish there was a way that was simple enough to work out how to remunerate people for their work that was taken without consent for these models that are commercial. I don't use AI in commercial work. I can only offer opinions. I think there's so much going on and it's moving so quickly that I don't have a fixed point of view. What I do see a lot of that troubles me is a lot of people simply not exploring anything, shutting down and just repeating the rhetoric that's out there of AI is going to destroy the world. And I understand people are fearful for their jobs and their security, and that's real. And that fear contributes to a lot of the spiciness that's out there. Yeah. I'm not on board with Sora, like I haven't tried a beta or anything, but it is exciting what you can do. And I use prompting all the time for research and writing and also sorts of heavy lifting when I'm using Gemini, which was Bard, or ChatGPT.
Yes. So in the text generation world, this is something you are already well invested in, already getting good utility out of at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it saves me so much time.
Yeah.
I find being able to bounce ideas off of an AI chatbot, again, it's always coming down to the choice I make and the taste that I have and what I think. I never put something into a chatbot and then just use that. I'm always reading every single word and honing it and changing it and manipulating it and double checking information if I'm doing research. It just gives me, sometimes it just throws up really interesting things that I hadn't thought of.
But this is the essence of creativity being at times a collaborative process. And you speak about filmmaking being a collaborative process. And as a writer in the past myself, that conversation, that collaboration you have with an editor is invaluable. But we don't always have the benefit of that, and that is a luxury that is afforded us less and less. But the ability through tools like a ChatGPT, like a Copilot, which is Microsoft's broader term for its AI assistance, but actually I think it's a very smart term because it really sets out, it really defines the role as well as the name of the AI assistant there. You are working on something together. Ultimately, you as the pilot are in charge. And to your point, the stuff that comes out is your decision. It's your vision at the end. But you have a co-pilot who can also do some of the heavy lifting. So I think it really brings some collaborations, some conversation that we might as solo creatives all too often otherwise miss. I would love to have a brief chat with you about your work as a therapeutic photography practitioner. Who is it for and how does it work?
All art is inherently therapeutic to some extent. And I don't mean the kind of therapeutic where you're sitting on a couch talking about your childhood or your feelings. I mean, that's valid. Talk therapy I've done tons of, and it's great for becoming aware of your story, but sometimes we can get stuck in those stories. Well, therapeutic photography is the active engagement with photography for personal exploration, healing, and growth. You know, whether you do it by yourself or with somebody guiding you. I started making portraits of strangers on a daily basis in 2018 or 2019. And I did it to challenge myself, to get out of the house, to get out of my head. I did it because I am somebody who has suffered from long periods of depression and extreme anxiety. I definitely experienced anxiety around people, but mostly it came out of a curiosity and a desire to photograph people because I absolutely am fascinated by the human form, the face, figure, observing others, but also I'm fascinated by the working of the mind, which is psychology. It's the science of the mind, how it works. Photography of other people is a really useful reflective tool for me to think about how I think, feel, and react to other people and what that says about myself and my relationship with myself, because ultimately that is the biggest tool I possess as a photographer, as a person in my life, to do anything I want to do. To work with that anxiety or that fear of others is a challenge that helps me open up avenues of access in everything in life, not just photography, but just being able to go out into the street and feel like you could speak to anybody, ask anybody anything you need, is an incredibly empowering feeling that makes me feel much more connected to the world around me and to myself. So the kind of therapeutic photography I practice at the moment is street portraiture. I do a workshop about once or twice a month where I take a small group of people out and we explore this practice. I've like the whole structure, I've gotten it pretty down, but I'm also developing other workshops that help people engage with themselves in the world and deal with their fears and their anxieties and their self-talk is a big thing. How you react to making a picture, I think, has a huge impact on your learning process, how enjoyable you find it. We do a lot of work on self-reflection, self-talk, how we speak to ourselves. So we always say to everybody, be kind. But really, you need to be kind to yourself in order to be kind to others. And, but how do you do that? So we work a lot with positive reinforcement. What I love about it is that it's photo forward, it's photography forward. We're working with photography. We're not really working with therapy, if that makes sense. But in order to work on our photography, we have to work on a lot of cognitive skills and emotional skills that are therapeutic. They're what we work on in therapy, like mood regulation and self-talk and self-criticism. And, it is an act of courage to go out into the street and ask somebody to make a picture of them, or even just compliment somebody on shoes that you like.
Yes.
We hear that I'm sure we're out there all the time with or without cameras and we're afraid. We want to say these things, but we stop ourselves, and that makes us feel bad about ourselves because, we haven't been able to overcome that fear. So it's an act of bravery and courage to go out and do that in spite of your fear. It doesn't mean that you don't have fear. It's not like I don't have fear. I have plenty of it. I'm learning how to handle my fear and work with it so that it's there. It's an informer, but it's not driving. It's not in the pilot seat.
There are lots of parallels here from my experience of this area through my wife, who works as an arts therapist, and she's brought skills from a career she's also worked in to bear in the therapeutic space, often with young people, neurodivergence, autism spectrum disorder, for example, and using play, using drama, sometimes just using conversation, frankly, to help those people, to help them address whatever challenges they've got going on. Let's press pause here for a moment, though, and switch over to this month's feature interview. Elise Swopes is an artist, photographer, and creator for the internet age. From her emergence as one of the earliest Instagram stars in the early 20-teens to her influential work in front of and behind the camera in the early 2020s, Swopes' work leans into creative, social, and even technical frontiers.
Well, my work, I would say, is surrealistic more than anything. I'm always kind of adding strange things to negative space. I think surreal kind of encompasses, but then again, it's not so much that I just do surrealism in one sense. I also do illustration, I do photography, I do graphic design, I do video as well that is surreal. So I'll just navigate the real world and add my own kind of spin.
So in that case, and this is a double-edged question in a way, what do you call yourself? Because you make photographs, you make images, you make animations, you make videos, you make all kinds of things. Is
Yes.
there a name? How you describe your role in creating that work? A creator, a digital artist, or do you
Probably.
prefer not to have those boundaries?
I know a lot of people do have those boundaries. They're very offended by the word influencer or content creator or things like that. I don't really mind at all. Whatever people want to call me that dictates my creativity is the best for me. But for me personally, I think visual storyteller is a favorite.
Mm.
Something I've kind of come upon is just I'm always willing to kind of tell a story, whether that's through a still image or a video.
So, looking at some of your work, Super Rare is a website, and we'll come back to that as a
Yes.
platform later on. I see that your work, it ticks so many of my boxes. It fuses urban architectures and nature, Chicago, which I think is your home city. It
Yes.
really features heavily in a lot of, certainly your most recent work. So one of the works I'm looking at here is The River is Everywhere, for example, and I can see
Yes.
that Chicago skyline with the Sears Tower, although I think it's called the Willis Tower now, isn't it? That's on the left. I can see this water, which I understand is Niagara Falls, cascading across the other buildings. It's compelling, it's hyper real yet surreal. Another one of your works, which does similar things, Such Great Heights. It's this giraffe that you've placed inside the observation deck in the same Willis Tower. I love them both. What's your process from a meaning point of view? I mean, there's lots that I take away from these, but also from a technical point of view, because the other thing here is that I believe these were shot on iPhone.
Absolutely, they were shot and edited. Honestly, I think at the end of the day, for me, it's really just about how beautiful the piece is.
Okay.
That's like the first step. Like, how is it look composition wise? Is it
Mm.
balanced? Is there a flow? Is there a way that you kind of want to look and ask questions about it? And I guess subconsciously, there's a lot of different things too that are interesting to me. Obviously, there's just a lot of water and flow, and maybe there's something to say about, the environment or, I don't know, global warming of a sort.
Yeah.
But to me personally, that when I'm going in to make it, it's not what I'm thinking,
Mm.
it's really just about how can I add something to this image that I captured of a skyline, whether it was in a helicopter ride or I'm on the top of a building or I'm
Mhm.
inside of a building looking outside of a window. Usually is how I capture these landscape shots. But then
Yeah.
when I'm looking at them on my phone, I'm like, okay, I don't want to just post this image of this cityscape. Great. I mean, it's beautiful, and there's a lot of people who post cityscapes, but I want to add something that I feel like would kind of make this elevated. And so
Mm.
that's why I started adding giraffes, and that's why I started adding waterfalls, and that's why I started adding different moons and making them wavy and all this different type of stuff. I think I was just trying to see the world at a different angle versus just delivering it to in the same way we see regularly.
The other part of that is shot on an iPhone. The quality, the hyper realism almost belies the fact that it was shot on iPhone. And now, don't get me wrong, I do a lot of work as a smartphone photographer myself. I don't mean to denigrate the quality of the image, but I look at that and I go, wow, that's really, really impressive, even knowing the quality that a smartphone camera can create. The other thing here, of course, looking at The River is Everywhere, that is an animation. We've got this water. I say it's cascading. I'm looking at it on the Super Rare website right now. That water just keeps on cascading there. So just from a technical point of view, can you just peel back the curtain a little bit? I know you do
Of
a lot of
course.
training, a lot of masterclasses in this area as to what your process is to creating this output.
Well, the first step to a piece like The River Everywhere, you would have to first take the photo.
Yeah.
So I love getting in a helicopter ride every other year
Oh, wow.
to with the doors open. I'll have my phone attached to my neck. My eyes will be like watering because the wind is shooting me in all directions.
Wow.
And I'll sometimes go out during the winter. I'll go out to the summer. I'll go out to the fall, like anytime. I'll go in the morning. I'll go at night just because the light's different. I'll go through sunset, sunrise, like it really, like you can't have enough, helicopter rides. So that's my first step. And then I have that kind of allows me to kind of have like a storage, so to speak, of inspiration at all times. So I could just create whenever, anytime I feel like it. So I'll pull a piece, pull an image, and this is one of those from Chicago.
Mm.
One of my favorite images. And then, of course, I'll use like a stock image because I haven't been to Niagara Falls yet. And this is one thing I love about the unlimited things that I encounter in my life based on the limitations that I've had on myself, which is that I was a broke college dropout when I started creating. And that's why I started creating on my phone. And that in the sense that, just because I haven't been somewhere doesn't mean that I can't utilize it in some way. So that's why I appreciate Adobe Stock, because I would download images and then I would be able to edit them with different apps on my phone. And I would be able to mask, cut out, place all these different things. And the thing to me about like making sure that these images that I create and that these different stock images that I use match is that I have to download and utilize every single one, to the point where like I'm spending so much money buying people's stock images that I don't even use. So I have like folders and folders and folders of tons and tons of waterfalls from everywhere around the world, not just Niagara Falls, but like everywhere. And so this one, I eventually like was placing them all on top of this image and found a way that it kind of matched, like in the perspective and the angle. And I think that's
Yeah.
the most important thing to me, is just making sure that the perspective matches. So cutting
Yeah.
out the pieces, cutting out different buildings. And then there's another app that I use where I can like mask out certain pieces and then create these types of arrows where they flow in the direction of the pixels. And so from there, that'll allow me to make it move. It sounds really easy, but it's very, very hard. It's taken me years to really master. And here it is.
We'll put a link to this image and some others that we're talking about in the show notes for the show. So if you are listening, or if you're on your mobile, then do tap through the description, take a look at the images, because they are, like I say, captivating, compelling, creative, surreal. And I should say, you mentioned something there as well, Adobe Stock. Adobe is a company that you do an awful lot of work with.
Yeah, I mean, Adobe's been my ride or die for a minute. I love Adobe. And now that I'm an employee, it's even more exciting because
You're an employee now.
I'm an employee of Adobe.
Wow. Okay. So what sort of stuff do you do with them?
I am a senior community relationship manager and an evangelist for Adobe Express.
Adobe Express, which has been
Yes.
a very exciting platform. I mean, very much angled towards the type of work that you speak about in terms of mobile workflows and mobile first content.
Absolutely. I'm very proud to work on it. It's an amazing experience so far.
Adobe will be at the Photography and Video Show in a couple of weeks' time for the first time in a few years. I'm very excited to see, particularly given all the announcements, all the new features that have been appearing across their product set over the last year or two. Very excited to see what they're able to bring to the show this year. So, Swopes, I want to take you back maybe 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, and just understand your influences. Clearly, Chicago is an important place for you. It's certainly where you are still bringing a lot of images that you've seen as you've been growing up, and now you've moved to another city, to New York. You still are brought back to Chicago with your work. Tell me about your journey to the point right now.
I'd say the work that I create has always been a response to something that I'm going through. For example, because I'm in Web3, I have a Web3 impact agency called Sunrise, and Sunrise is focused on creating impactful experiences for artists in Web3, but it's entirely based on these sunrise photos that I captured for 3 years straight while waking up at 5 a.m. every day to meditate, to read, to write, to really work out and kind of make sure that my health is, and my mental health is really good to show up for other people. Especially being a content creator with being so front facing with a lot of followers for a very long time. It's
a role model.
It's not that, I mean, it's hard when you're young, and especially going through many changes. And so I kind of grew up on the internet in some way. And that's also what my TEDx is about. I did a TEDx at the University of Urbana-Champaign, and it's called Child of the Internet. I've failed and I've succeeded, throughout the internet. So all of those experiences kind of tie into the reason why I create the things I create. For example, Sunrise Art Club is because those sunrises are based on the concept that putting health first, no matter what's going on, especially digitally, is very important, because the stuff will leave you, it'll move on without you. And you have to put yourself first and your health first, your physical health and your mental and your spiritual, for sure.
Successes, failures, our art, our output reflecting where we are at any given moment. Tell me about Instagram. Instagram has certainly been a success because you were really there very much at the beginning of Instagram's journey. And would you say that was also part of the beginning of your journey as well?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think my journey definitely started on Instagram. Granted, it probably started on MySpace or maybe on Zanga or something like
Wow.
that. But
We're showing our age now, I think.
100%. I'm very happy about that. Because, I mean, people don't know. We went through a lot. I mean, I was able to really customize my profile, and I was able to sell profile layouts to people for money in
Oh,
school
wow.
when I was in middle school. So I was really like creating a business for myself. Really was no surprise when Instagram came around and I was, a dropout, didn't really want to be in class. I think everyone was asking me, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And I'm like, I don't know. I just want to be out. I just want to be outside. I just want to meet people. I just want to do stuff. At that time, I didn't realize what I was doing, but I just wanted to learn life. I wanted to experience and dive in first. And that's really what happened. And so I got an iPhone 4. That was my ticket to the world. I was able to download free apps and, social media. And I was able to finally, talk to people more. And then I found different apps on there where I could create and edit photos. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then I would take photos of like my friends, and I would take pictures of like cityscapes, and people would always ask me like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your phone? Why are you taking pictures?
Do you remember what your first post on Instagram was?
I think my first post on Instagram was when I was going to South by Southwest, and it's not on there anymore because I wish I never like deleted a lot of stuff, but I remember it very clearly because it was just so like, it was the craziest trip. Me and my friends in Chicago, when I was a rapper, we went to South by Southwest, and I was in a van with like 7, 8 people from Chicago, a couple rappers, couple friends, couple photographers, couple people. And we drove all the way from Chicago to Austin, Texas.
That's quite a road trip.
Yes,
My word.
it was. And I was just young. I didn't really know what was going on. Honestly, I was like 20, but so I took a screenshot of the Google Maps from Chicago to Austin. And then that was my first post.
Wow.
And I was like going on a trip. And that was the first like pictures I was taking.
And then at what point did you begin to take it seriously? Or maybe other people begin to take your work on there seriously? Because I think we take for granted the whole Instagram thing. It wasn't obvious that Instagram was going to become a thing. There was any number of different platforms that were all vying for attention then. When did other people realize that this really was a thing for you?
I'd probably say when people started calling me an Insta goddess in Chicago.
Oh, wow. Okay. That would do it.
Because friends, like big, people who everybody kind of knew would like follow me. People would ask me about Instagram. They would be like, how did you get all these followers? But that was a little bit after Instagram actually decided to make me a suggested user. And a suggested user at that time was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And it was just a list of people who, when you sign up for Instagram, you've got a list of folks who are probably a good example of how you should utilize Instagram. They're making art, they're posting consistently, they're doing all these different things to kind of get on the popular page at the time, which is a big deal.
What was the impact of that in terms of your followers and your likes and so on?
Oh, it was huge. I was gaining thousands of followers a day. Like literally, it was a shock to the system because at first I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. And then my fiance, he's also, we met 14 years ago. And so he's also an Instagrammer, and he, blew up on Instagram afterwards. But he was like, oh, I think you're a suggested user. And I was like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And so we like looked into it. And then, I just started branding myself. I started making logos. I made a website. Like I was just
Yeah.
like, all right, here we go. And then I was a part of the first influencer agency. Then
Mm.
they sold to a big agency, and I worked on a lot of big projects and a lot of big brand projects for their first go around for influencers.
Nike, Apple. I mean, we're talking about global household
Yes.
names here. And like I say, this was before influencer became a thing. Did you have a role model though? Was there someone who you looked up to and said, well, this is the journey that they're on. I would like to go on that journey. Or was it the Wild West for you and everyone else treading the same path at the time?
I wish that there was someone that I could have just like read a book, or, I mean, granted, I could read a lot of books now that may not have to do exactly what my problem is, but I could find one. But, at that time, it was just, there was no one doing what we were doing. We were just figuring it out along the way and messing up along the way, but also succeeding along the way. But, it was like, it just feels so surreal now to see
Mm.
how influencers have evolved over time. It's now looked at so negatively. When we had first really started, it was just, okay, hey, we're people with a lot of followers and we were just making art, and now brands are hitting us up and we need to figure out how to do business. And that, I think, was the biggest shock to the system. It's like, okay, there's contracts, there's like big talks with people,
Yep.
there's travel. Like, I didn't even have a credit card and hotels were asking me for my incidentals. I'm like, what is that? What do
Yeah.
you mean incidentals?
Yeah.
Like, I was learning every step of the way, so confused, but so ready for like whatever was to come. And there was just no one really telling anybody what was up.
Let's fast forward a bit then to maybe 3 or so years ago. NFTs, these non-fungible tokens, were very much thrust on stage as a Web3 marketplace mechanism by which digital creatives could build community, build cash, all with the help of some cryptocurrency. There was a lot of hype and expectation around them at the time. I remember covering them. But what has followed since then now, but here in 2024, has been seen by many as a bit of an NFT crash, with prices of many high-profile NFTs now valued at a fraction of their selling price. So you went big on NFTs at the time, and I've read about a number of projects, you mentioned 1 or 2 of them already, that you've been involved in that Web3 space, particularly where social issues and creativity meet. So what's your take on NFTs, where they are right now, and what maybe their longer term journey, or what their trajectory is in terms of their value and their utility to creative community, to creatives, and to collectors as well?
Yeah. Okay. So first, NFTs. I mean, what is there not to say?
A lot
Especially
has
for
been said, to be
someone,
fair.
it's just crazy because I've somehow decided yet again to start something where there is no book, there is no person, there's nothing out there that's really telling me what's going on. And ever since I launched my NFTs on Super Rare, I mean, it's just been a whirlwind of lessons, of experience, of friendship, of growth, of evolution in so many different ways. And I'm sure many people can say the same. If not, even if you have lost a ton of money, you've also gained so many friends, and built things that you might not even have ever thought you can build because you've met people who are on the same wavelength as you. And to me, that's what Web3 is about. At the end of the day, it's our new connection. It's our new wave of communication and transparency in the way that we communicate, in the way that we exchange information. And that's really what I've learned at the end of the day. But also on the other side, where I'm not too involved, it's like, I mean, granted, I am, but I kind of stay out of a little bit of it, is the crypto side. I love decentralized finance. I think there's so many opportunities there, but I just don't have the time to dive into it. Although I am a part of a lot of initiatives and a lot of boards where we're going to go and help speak and make sure that the US is aware of different implementations of these processes. So that's kind of why I love what I do, is that I'm not so much your Bored Ape or your other people, where I am creating, like a cartoon or a brand or an experience for a community of that, like, it's like I'm creating a community for people who aren't really seeing themselves in any of those communities.
I wanted to come on to that point, really, because you mentioned a number of times, and I put it into my question as well, because that's been one of my takeaways from following the NFT journey over the last 3 or 4 years, is that a lot of it seems to revolve around this community that builds up around the work. It's not just a transactional thing. Oh, look, there's a creator creating something. I would like to own that, have a stake in it. There's lots of C's here. There's the creators, there's the crypto, there's the contracts as well, smart contracts, all the rest of that. But I think the community stuff sometimes gets left behind. So I'm pleased that that's been very much at the forefront of your journey as well.
I think that if you are involved in Web3 and day-to-day, community is the only thing that you know, because otherwise there's nothing else that it's worth, because it's a volatile experience with crypto. I mean, one day it's up, one day it's down, but you could be broke and you still have friends and you still have people you're building with, and that's fine. And I think that's kind of the hopium that most people are sipping, to be honest.
There are some barriers there, and it feels as though, particularly around crypto, around Web3, there is a technical barrier, but there's also a community barrier as well, in that it seems to be tech bros, males, very often tech-centric people who are at the forefront of this, and it's very easy to be put off as soon as you take a look online at the profiles who typically engage with this stuff. It would be easy for some creatives who don't come from those communities to go, oh no, this isn't for me. There aren't people like me. That's those people. And they are quite intimidating. And you've been trying to do some work to even out that playing field, to make it more welcoming to different communities, to make it more democratic for a broader cross-section of creators.
Thank you for so eloquently putting that together. I'll just have you as my hype man for every event. If you could possibly just come through, or we'll just put you through digitally. But yeah, I mean, I'm just so impressed with how we show up for people who aren't shown up for. I think also, like, we produced one of the first NFT 101s where you can go into sunrise.art and you can go and click learn about NFTs, and you'll go in and you'll see an NFT dictionary with every single word that you always hear about. And you're like, what does that even mean? Like, what, breaking down, what is an NFT? What is blockchain? What is Web3? All this different stuff that kind of eludes people. And then a workshop that I've put together to educate people about Web3 and a bunch of other stuff. But I think education is first. It's something that we really pride ourselves on. And then 2, making sure that we're putting in artists who aren't always celebrated as often as other people. You'll see like the same names. Like, I love Beeple. We've like been on projects together. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's great. But like, Beeple has enough accolades, enough stories, enough, media. And there's so many amazing artists out there who deserve to shine, and that's what we're really trying to do for them. Most importantly, every time we do a gallery event with a big brand, whether it's Glamour Orangey from Louis Vuitton or MetaMask, right? Like, we did a partnership with MetaMask, which is the biggest Web3 wallet. And then also we put together the first NFT marketplace for incarcerated artists. So we were working and have been working with incarcerated creators who want to sell NFTs and want to learn about NFTs. So we help educate them. We provide funding for them. We're working on a ton of other stuff to just implement different programming in prisons. So at the end of the day, we love what we do, but we would love to not do it, to just make sure there's other ways that people are not imprisoned. But, if we can try to help them gain monetary funding, help them collect a little bit while they're incarcerated, and once they get out, they'll be better.
You mentioned there an NFT 101. We'll put some links to that in our show notes.
Yeah.
For any creators who are interested, curious about NFTs and whether there might be something available for them, might be something they would like to pursue, what top piece of advice would you give to them?
Well, first, I would understand your why you want to create NFTs. Most importantly, what is it going to do for you, whether you don't succeed or do succeed? I think the most important thing for me and for a lot of creators is understanding not to put your eggs all in one basket. Create the art that is most important to you, express yourself, continue to elevate your skills, but don't, make it your all. NFTs and crypto are just like any other betting, any other kind of game, kind of thing that you can do. You can get addicted and it can change the way you behave if you get too much or too little. And you really just have to make sure you understand what you want your outcome to be.
There may be something, there may be nothing in this, but it strikes me, just drawing a line from the beginning of your journey with Instagram to the beginning of your journey with NFTs. There's a parallel there. You aren't afraid to try something new, to set foot in uncharted sand, even though it might be a little bit shaky. You are brave in that regard, I guess.
Thank you. That means a lot. I am. I feel brave a lot. It can be a lonely road to an extent, but I'm glad I have people around me who have been on that same journey, but it's also hard. It's tough, but also tough being the person who wants to always be morally sound in so many ways too. I just love helping people and I love doing the right thing. And I think at the end of the day, if that makes me sleep better at night, then that's totally fine.
Speaking of helping people, you're going to be speaking at the photography and video show later this month. What will you be sharing with us there? Tease us.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to be talking about, my career, but more in depth with more facts, more figures. I'm going to be bringing a lot of information about how to beat this thing called the algorithm that everyone's so obsessed about. I know that we want to talk about algorithms, and I'm just going to give a little touch on it, but I'm kind of anti-algorithm. I believe that we should be living our truest selves based on the risks that we take, based on the dreams that we have, based on the experiences that we want to have. And so I'm willing to question the algorithm, but also put out some facts about the algorithm.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that. For now, Elise Swopes, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and look forward to seeing you in Birmingham.
Thank you. Can't wait.
Links to Elise Swopes' work and the really useful NFT 101 she mentioned there are in the show notes for this episode, somewhere in your podcast player of choice. And her talk at the Photography and Video Show at the NEC will be on the Sunday, the 17th of March, day 2, on the creator stage at 1 p.m. And she'll be back again at 4 p.m. for a creator meet and greet. Speaking of the in-person show, I promised some new news earlier. Well, we sort of let the cat out the bag in the interview just then, but Adobe will be back at the Photography and Video Show with the Adobe Hub and a theatre showcasing all of their exciting new stuff, including, I'm sure, the generative AI stuff that we've been talking about here on the podcast. Head over to the website too for details of the Nikon School Ambassador lineup, the Fujifilm School lineup, Canon and Sony too. We've got book signings now with Rocky Nook, and the masterclasses that Hazel from the show mentioned last month are selling out quickly. You know where to go, photographyshow.com. And I mentioned a discount code. Who doesn't love a discount code? Now, the tickets for the show are already remarkably good value. Don't tell Hazel and the organisers I said that. But because you are a loyal listener to this podcast, you can get a further 20% off your standard entry ticket by using the discount code PODTPS24 at checkout. So go to photographyshow.com, click on Get Tickets right there at the top, and remember that discount code PODTPS24. Gabrielle, fascinating conversation there with Elise. And as we were talking about before, one of the frontiers of creativity as a photographer or a filmmaker or creator in the much more broader sense is how AI, generative AI, is influencing our workflows, influencing our work. But another area that we touched on there with Elise is the way that technology is also influencing the distribution of our work and some of the fundamentals about its monetary value to us as creators. What's your take? Because I know that the centralized, decentralization conversation is something that you've engaged with and indeed have worked with in the past. What did you take away from that part of the chat with Elise? And what's your experience as a professional creator in this area of technology and distribution of our creative works?
I mean, one of the things that you need as a creator to make things is money.
Yes.
That is the way the world works.
It's always been the case, hasn't it?
We're not on universal basic income yet.
Not yet.
So you have to figure out a way as a creative how you're going to survive. And there's many ways to do that. You don't necessarily have to earn a living at the thing that you do creating. And some people balance that really well. They make a living doing something else and then they create. Others, live full time off of their work. What they create pays their bills and they balance that very well. So I suppose you need to think about how am I going to earn a living from this? And certainly when I saw NFTs blow up and smart contracts and been watching blockchains technology for a while, it's very interesting, the idea of decentralization where no one server, no one machine, no one person, no one organization can control everything. And certainly, that's the world of blockchain and crypto.
Yep.
And that's interesting. And NFTs, the thing that caught my attention most was the idea of a smart contract and being able to assign value to something that's purchased. The transaction is instantaneous. There's no management of it. There's no chasing of invoices.
So a smart contract, just for those who aren't necessarily so plumbed into it, a smart contract is where built into the transactional technology, you can put some rules in there that say, right, so any money that changes hands, 10% goes to this person, 5% goes to this person, and these other things, whatever they may be, will happen.
It's a funnel where you get to assign royalties, let's say. So like for the sale of work, that's really interesting because not only if you buy a photograph of mine does the transaction happen instantaneously, but if I'm crediting somebody in the photograph, a model, hair and makeup, anybody who helped make the picture, I can assign that ahead of time. And that when that payment comes in, it just gets sent out to their accounts.
Yep.
And
no chasing down lost royalties, which goodness knows in a lot of creative spaces has caused a lot of headaches, a lot of consternation, and a lot of litigation over the years as well.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of time, a lot of frustration. Yeah, so there's the smart contract, but then there's the blockchain, which is immutable. It's a ledger that can't be changed. So it's not like a spreadsheet where you can just go in and edit it. Once it's in, it's in. And that's interesting from a perspective of scarcity or additions or rarity that increases your could potentially, depending on your market, if you have a market, increase your work's value. But what we're talking about with smart contracts is, and this kind of, especially with the NFT being able to build in a secondary royalty for the artist. So you buy my work, you sell it to David. I get a percentage that I can set. I would get a percentage of that transaction, but it's essentially secondary market income. The thing that's really interesting about that is it's scalable income, which means it's money while you sleep. You're not wage working.
Yeah.
So your work is working for you once it's out into the world.
And of course, you speak about scarcity there and that potentially having some value in the non-digital world, maybe, as well as in the digital world. Editions is certainly an area where we try to create a scarcity. What's your take on those?
In the print world?
Yes.
Yeah. So in the world of photography or indeed art, if a photographer puts an image out into the world, let's say on a print-on-demand system, which I've seen, we're seeing the rise of those sales funnels.
Yeah.
And let's say you print it on Hahnemuhle paper, Permajet, or whatever you print it on. And it goes out, you never have any interaction with the person who buys it. And it goes out into the world just like that. What's the difference between that and me getting, or anybody who would do this? No, I wouldn't, but getting an image of yours off the internet, upresing it, printing it on the very same paper.
Yeah.
There's no difference, really. You're creating posters of your work, and that's fine. You can do that. There's nothing to stop you. I've been looking into editions because we've been having this conversation for so long with so many photographers, print sales. And the truth is, I don't know very many people who are selling a lot of prints to the point where that could be a main income stream. And I don't know that it should necessarily be. But it is interesting if you're going to put your work out into the world that you do it with as much care as you made it. And so the world of editions, which is, again, I did a deep dive on this and rooted in France, of course, and art and commerce and how art is taxed or not. Traditionally, a limited edition would be 30 and no more. And if you were going to do it in a purist sense, you print it all at once and never again. And there's many ways to do this. And I'm not saying that there's a right and a wrong way. There's a purist way, and then there is any other way you want to do it.
So printing them all at once so that you've got consistency of ink and of paper, medium, whatever it is you're printing on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And this was obviously a little bit more of an impact, making more of a difference when we were talking about, let's say, lithographic prints, where you have to literally prep ink and press, and the humidity and temperature of the day would affect the paper. And, you'd have all these variables. Or you were in the dark room and each print was, the chemistry was mixed a certain way, and, the paper was a certain temperature, the chemistry was a certain temperature. You'd print them all at once. And then you'd sign and number them, and there would be a way of validating that this work was indeed your work by your hands. And it would be put out into the world because, before Instagram, how would other people see your work except in print? So it was a way of communicating with the world. And then there would be a certain number of those images floating around that would be for sale. And you would sell that edition. And once it was sold out, it was gone. And then the secondary market takes over, and you've got 30 images out there, and 30 people own them, or one person owns all 30, and other people want to buy them. And then a secondary market's created. You would have a certificate of authenticity. This is where NFTs come in. It'd be very interesting to have that as your certificate of authenticity, which people have been doing. Back to this idea of editions and scarcity. I mean, if there's no market for your work, it doesn't matter if you print 1 or 30 or 300 images. If nobody buys them, nobody buys them. But I do think it's important for me to have my hand in my work. So validating the fact that the print that was made was by me, it was my approved print. I did see it and I approved the print, and it is what I want to put into the world. I happen to be, as I said, a colorist. So I'm very well versed in the process of grading my work, but my background was in printing. I was a C-type printer. And so I, recently just got back into digital printing. And that's one of the talks I'll be doing at the photography show, is taking people on that process of actually exploring different paper types for images. And we talked about recipes and having taste and serving your image. It's the same thing with paper choice when you're printing. Different papers will affect the emotional impact of and the visual resonance of the image differently. Figuring out a good way to create a print, sign it, and then make a certificate of authenticity, sign it.
You will be speaking about the art of printing, bringing portraits to life in print at the Photography and Video Show on the Sunday, the 17th of March. You'll also be talking about the therapeutic power of street photography on the Sunday too, on the Behind the Lens stage. If you're listening in and you want to have a chat with Gabrielle about either of these, then come along to those sessions and maybe pop some questions to her afterwards. And that is all we have time for on the podcast this month, and indeed for this season. Well, sort of. The in-person photography and video show takes place between Saturday the 16th and Tuesday the 19th of March 2024 at the NEC in Birmingham, England. And the plan is that we will release a bonus episode of the podcast from the show. So if you listen to the podcast and you're at the show in Birmingham, then we want to hear from you. So come and find me. I'll be there all 4 days. Hit me up on the socials if you like. We would love to grab a word from you, and we'll try and include as much flavour from the show in Birmingham as we can in that bonus episode. Meanwhile, if you've enjoyed this season of the show, then please do all of the things that podcasts normally ask you to do. Hit subscribe, tell your friends, share with your local camera club. Actually, I'm not sure many podcasts ask you to do that. And hey, we would just love it if you took 2 tiny minutes of your time to leave us a review. Don't forget that promo code PODTPS24 and save 20% on your tickets. We're on the socials. Search us up on Facebook. We are at The Photography Show on Instagram, and we're even on TikTok now too, at UK Photo Show. I'd like to thank all of our guests from this series, from Hugo Benand and Boris Eldigson at the beginning of the run, to Kelly Brown and Ben Moore, and, well, countless others in between who've shared their experiences, their expertise, and even their opinions with us. If you've only just discovered us towards the end of the series, then I urge you to go back to episode 1 because we've had some corking conversations over the last year or so. Speaking of which, Gabrielle, thank you for joining us this month. How can listeners best tune into your work online?
Thank you for having me. I think the best place to start is my website, gabriellemutola.com, just my full name. I have a Patreon, which is a deep dive on a lot of things. There's a lot of content, a lot of behind the scenes process, color grading, and that is patreon.com/gmotophotos, which is also my Instagram handle.
Gabrielle, thank you very much indeed. That's all for now. See you in Birmingham.